don't think it's hyperbolic to say that Nightdive Studios are almost single-handedly preserving some of my favourite games, and I'm sure our collective favourite games, from the last 30 years. Now we have Star Wars Dark Forces that sees the full Kex engine remake treatment, remaster, although we have so many elements of a remake in here. And it just goes to show how good these games were when they were first released, that they hold up this well even to this day. Have Nightdive, a real force for light within the gaming world, done it once again? Or were these dark forces too much to overcome? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now, let's find out. Upon booting up the game, you're greeted with several accessibility options. Things like view bobbing, weapon flashing, HUD flashing, all of these can be toggled on or off to make your experience one that's going to be comfortable for you. They've even gone so far as to allow you to change the menu transition speed. Control options feature motion options, allowing you to tweak the gyro aiming. There's HD rumble support. You can swap the sticks, enable or disable smoothing, invert the vertical look, change turn acceleration, fiddle around with dead zones, all of the things that for some weird reason I enjoy. From the enhancement screen, you can actually toggle the original or the new cutscenes, the enhanced or the original sprites, even down to changing the render mode between hardware and software, something that you absolutely don't need on the Switch version, but they've given you it anyway. You can change the crosshairs with 18 different examples, change the scale of it, the color, and if you don't like the ones they've given you, give it a custom one. In the vault, they give you lots of information about the game's original development, all the way from the early prototype stage to some of the ideas that potentially didn't make the cut, and it's incredibly interesting. There's concept art in here, some pre-renders, and detailed information about the cutscenes and how they were made. Although in the intro there I mentioned that Nightdive are preserving, they're almost like gaming historians, giving us so much more about the original development. You will find achievements in here as well if you like those. And that then takes us nicely onto the visuals and the overall look of the game now, as well as the changes that have been made. Check out the difference between software and hardware rendering. Now obviously everything is running at a silky smooth 60 FPS. It may even be higher than that. It mentioned 120 FPS somewhere, but I'm not sure if that's for the other platforms. As with all Kex engine games, the gyro support is absolutely fantastic. They really do seem to have dialed it to a point where it's some of the best that we have on Switch. Now, it's obviously facilitated by excellent frame rates, but I wish that every first-person shooter used it. While the original sprite work certainly doesn't look bad, when you toggle between the original and the improved, they really have cleaned up quite a lot. It's a significant upgrade while still maintaining that pixel look. Just take these switches on the left-hand side of the screen. Sometimes with air quote remasters, they lose what was originally intended. A recent good example though would be something like Tomb Raider. They've managed to add in a lot of information, and those new sprites on the character models also look great. For me, one of the biggest improvements is actually your own weapon. Now I remember playing this back in the day and thinking, wow, the weapon looks like a photo, but I think it's fair to say that it wasn't quite as photorealistic as I thought it was at that time. But with just a little cleaning up, straightening out some of those lines, they've subtly improved that, but it has a significant impact on its overall look. Now, if there is one potential negative to this type of upscale, it would be the tessellation. It stands out much more, certainly on some of the exterior textures like the rock walls, but it's all part and parcel of what you're getting, and actually these aren't new additions, they're just more noticeable now that everything is so sharp. Now that full widescreen support does give you much more field of vision, and just like the Turok remasters, you can manually adjust the field of view to suit, well, whatever you want really, all the way up to an astronomical 150 degrees, which is probably the most nauseating thing I've ever seen. While it defaults to 90, you can also go much lower, all the way down to 70 if you so choose. Then we have the more advanced options that do quite significantly change what was originally available in the game. The first of those is anti-aliasing, which is off by default. I'm not sure if this uses post-processed anti-aliasing or if it's a more hardware-intensive version, but I think the reason it's off by default is because honestly, just rendered up to native resolution, this looks fantastic. Can we really see the difference when we're playing the game? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. The other graphics option you've got is bloom. And this is mainly evident around light sources, or even the fake lights in the game, giving them a glowing look. One of the more subtle changes is the true 3D perspective. This changes the way the game renders when you look up and down, whereas here we can see it doesn't look like I'm actually looking up and down, it looks more like I'm moving, sliding vertically up and down. Whereas when we have the true 3D perspective, we feel stationary and yeah, it's significantly different. As I said at the start of the video, it's more like a remake in a lot of elements, but because they're subtle, you wouldn't even notice, which is almost the best way to do these types of things. From a control standpoint, we've got some slight tweaks here as well. Having a radial menu, as we've seen them use in other games, is just so much more modern and easy to use. This makes quickly switching between weapons much more straightforward and seamless. The significant improvements to the cutscenes also have to be mentioned. The artwork has been completely improved in almost every way. They look so crisp and clean without having that look of the artificial that you so often get with just a standard upscale. They've been completely reworked in so many different ways, it's hard to put it into one video. It seems like there's also been some work done to the sound. With perhaps some resampling to the vocal lines. But for visuals and audio, I think this is probably Nightdive's best work so far, and I said the same thing for Turok 3. I can't imagine the amount of time and effort it's taken them to do this, but for those who loved the originals, you will certainly enjoy this, and you've got the option of switching back and having it exactly how you remember if you want to. I can almost guarantee 5 minutes after, you won't. You'll be back on these new visuals. They look fantastic. The gameplay is as good as I remember it. Now, these are affectionately called boomer shooters, apparently, but as a child I loved the fact that I got to play within this universe in a first-person shooter, stealing the Death Star plans, escaping to my ship, but I distinctly remember it feeling a little difficult to control, so it actually plays quite differently with the modern controls. It's so much easier to quickly aim at enemies and strafe around in the environment. Because the input latency is so small, it's very easy to perform the difficult jumps that are required to reach the secret areas, and as you'd expect, there are lots of different secrets around. Some of them are actually tied to those achievements, like shooting one of the little mouse bots. As far as enemies, well, you'll be fighting various different members of the Imperial ranks. As you'd expect, a large quantity of those will be stormtroopers. The artificial intelligence, well, let's be honest, they weren't the brightest. They didn't really have to be. They're firing their lasers at you. They get a few seconds to breathe and then you take them out. Depending on the difficulty mode you've chosen, they'll get a little more accurate, but I think even on the hardest difficulty, it's quite manageable and definitely easier with these motion controls. There's no pretending that it's a complex game, but it doesn't need to be. With that said, it had some strong level design. It wasn't so simplistic that it felt like it was on rails, but it also wasn't so complex that you were constantly getting lost. It combines elements where you'll have to go out, achieve an objective and then return to your ship, which added to the feeling of actually going on missions. By its very nature, it's certainly repetitive, with enemies constantly throwing themselves at you, but it goes a little deeper, with some items offering significant advantages like being able to see in the dark with the night vision goggles, and that then also making it much easier to discover some of the secret areas. You'll not find any respawn in health here. You've got the traditional health points, which can be boosted by health pickups, and the shield pickups, which will give you a little extra layer of defense. One real highlight for me in terms of level design was the sewer stage that sees you literally swimming through, yeah, I'm sure you can figure out what you're swimming through, but there you'll need to switch to your night vision goggles as you move between these tunnels in what I can only describe as a poo-la coaster. It's great fun and it's also quite terrifying, especially when the batteries on your device run out and you're plunged into darkness. You've also got your map, which is incredibly handy for spotting any secret or hidden areas, and the overlay of that is nice and bright and very easy to follow. This wireframe gradually expands as you discover new areas, so it's very apparent where you've been and where you haven't. Now, as far as the visuals and the performance go, well, I'm really impressed, as I knew I would be with the Kex engine. While you could argue, as I'm sure some people will do in the comments, oh, they're very dated visuals, oh, there are much better games out there. Trust me, these comments will definitely be there. For me, it's about marking, or at least giving some form of score to the amount of effort that's gone into it. Star Wars The Dark Forces Remaster is going to set you back £24.99 or your regional equivalent, which is quite significantly higher than the other Nightdive remasters like Quake and Quake 2, but this is definitely, as those, the definitive version of the game, including the vault that I mentioned at the start, with that curated collection of different developmental materials, in-game assets, and just a history lesson, really. They've enhanced every aspect as far as those visuals go, as we've seen, and it is a fun game. It will take around 10 hours to finish, and it is only single player. I would have loved to have seen them bring across the co-op that they implemented in some of the other titles, but the skeptic in me says you are potentially paying a little bit more for the Star Wars name. While it does offer good value, it's expensive. So if you enjoyed the original 1995 release, you're going to love coming back to it on the Switch. The implementation of gyro controls make the Switch version, in my opinion, one of the best. Having a Joy-Con in each hand, aiming with the right, moving with the left, it just feels perfect. I salute Nightdive. They are bringing back some amazing games, but they're not just doing it in a lazy way. They're putting the effort in and making you feel like you're getting something for your money. Overall then, it gets a SwitchUp score of 87%. Is this one you're going to be picking up, or are you going to wait for a little sale? Either way, I don't think you'll be disappointed, and it's great to be back in this universe. Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys.